March 15th, 44 BC Rome, Italy. He walked through the stone halls. His sandals echoed on the floor. The crowd waited. They cheered his name, but behind him came death. A man in a robe stepped closer, then another, and another. Suddenly, pain. A knife, then another and another. Blood hit the floor. His white robe turned red. He turned to one man. "Even you," he whispered, and fell. The room was silent. The great Caesar was gone. His friends had killed him. But why? Was it power, fear, revenge? And who gave the final order? This is real. Every word, every stab. This is not just history. This is murder. Subscribe to Unbelievable True Story, because even the most powerful man in the world can be taken down. And your next story might be just as dark. Rome, 85 BC. The city was loud. Horses clattered on stone roads. People shouted in the markets. The sun was hot. The air smelled like smoke, sweat, and power. In a small house near the Forum, a boy sat very still. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar. He was only 15 years old, but he had already seen death. His father had just died. His body lay cold in the next room. Caesar's eyes were red. He didn't cry anymore. Not today. He stared out the window. Soldiers marched past in shiny armor. He didn't look at them with fear. He looked at them with hunger. Caesar was born into a noble family, but they were poor now. Not rich like before. Still, he held a secret in his blood. His family claimed they came from the gods, from Venus, the goddess of love. That made Caesar feel powerful, even if no one else did. But in the streets of Rome, people didn't care about gods. They cared about gold, swords, and control. And right now, Rome was on fire. Not with flames, but with war. Two powerful men were fighting, Sulla and Marius. They both wanted to rule Rome. They were cousins. Now they were enemies. And Caesar? He was stuck in the middle. Marius was Caesar's uncle, his mother's brother. But Sulla had the army. When Sulla won, Caesar's life became a target. One night, soldiers came to his door. They wanted him dead. He was just a boy. He ran. He didn't take clothes. He didn't take gold. Just his name. He hid in the hills outside the city. Cold nights, empty stomach, fear every second. He changed how he walked, changed how he talked. Every sound in the dark could mean death. He kept asking himself, why me? Why now? But he survived. Somehow, he survived. And he would never forget what it felt like to be hunted. The war in Rome had calmed. Sulla was now the ruler. But Caesar was not safe. Sulla had ordered his death. He called Caesar dangerous, too proud, too connected, too ambitious, but Caesar had vanished. For years he stayed far away from Rome. He joined the army, not as a leader, but as a soldier. He marched for miles each day, through dust, through rain, through rivers. He slept on the ground. He ate dry bread, and he fought hard. He was brave in battle. Some said he was too brave. He rushed into danger when others ran back. One day, in a mountain fight, Caesar grabbed a flag from a dying soldier. He ran up the hill alone. Enemy arrows flew all around him. Still, he kept climbing. When he planted the flag at the top, the battle turned. The army won. People cheered his name. After that day, soldiers looked at him differently. He was no longer just a boy from a broken family. He was a hero. But Caesar wanted more. He wanted to be remembered, not as a soldier, but as a leader, as a king, without a crown. He left the army for a short time and went to a small island near Greece. He wanted to study, to learn how to speak, write, and lead. But the sea was not safe. One day, pirates attacked his ship. They took him prisoner. They tied him in ropes and dragged him to their island. They laughed at him. They said, "Let's ask for ransom." Maybe he's worth something. They wanted 20 talents of silver. Caesar laughed. He said, "No, I'm worth 50. The pirates stared at him. Was he joking? Number. He sent his men to get the money, and while he waited, he joked with the pirates. He told them stories. He made fun of their cooking. He even read poems to them. They started to like him. But Caesar never smiled for long. He whispered to them, "When I'm free, I'll come back. I'll find you. I'll kill you all." They laughed. They thought he was joking. He wasn't. Weeks later, after the ransom came, Caesar was free. He found a ship. He hunted the pirates down, and he kept his promise. Every single one was crucified. This was not a boy anymore. This was Caesar, and Rome had no idea what was coming next. Rome. 70 BC. The city was alive again, but not safe. Rich men ruled the Senate. Poor men starved in the streets. Gangs roamed the alleys. Powerful men made rules, but broke them when they pleased. It was a city full of shadows, full of fear. And into this storm came Caesar, older, wiser, and hungry. He looked at the city and smiled. He knew what to do. He would not take power by force. He would take it with words. He ran for office, spoke to crowds, promised food, jobs, safety. He wore simple clothes, ate with poor men, walked the streets at night. They loved him. The rich rolled their eyes. They called him a clown, a showman. But Caesar didn't care what they thought. He cared what the people thought, and the people saw him as a hero. He gave speeches that made crowds cheer. He gave coins with his face to the poor. He threw games with lions and gladiators. He smiled, shook hands, and whispered, "You matter." Every move was a step closer to power. Then he did something no one expected. He joined forces with two powerful men, Pompey, a war hero with a strong army, Crassus, the richest man in Rome. Together, they made a secret deal. They would help each other rise. This secret deal had a name, the First Triumvirate. 3 men, 1 goal, total control of Rome. They won elections, they passed laws, they crushed enemies. The Senate grew afraid. Whispers began. Is Caesar planning something? Will he make himself king? But Caesar just smiled. He knew he needed more. He needed war. Because war brings glory. War brings power. And Caesar wanted both. So he left Rome again, to conquer the land of Gaul. What happened next would make him a legend. 58 BC, northern Italy. Caesar stood at the edge of a wild land. It was called Gaul. Today, we call it France. Back then, it was full of fierce tribes. They hated Rome. They loved war. They did not bow to any empire. Caesar smiled. He would make them bow. He led his army across the border. He had 4 legions. That's over 20,000 soldiers. The Romans marched through forests and fields. They built bridges, forts, roads. They were fast, brutal, unstoppable. Caesar struck hard and fast. He beat one tribe, then another, and another. His reports to Rome were cold and simple. We came. We fought. They died. But behind those words was horror. Fields burned, villages screamed, men were slaughtered, women and children were taken. Some say Caesar killed over 1 million people in Gaul. Some call it war, others call it genocide. But Caesar kept going. The most powerful tribe of all was the Arverni. Their leader was a young warrior named Vercingetorix. He had fire in his eyes. He was smart. He united all the tribes under one flag. For the first time, Gaul stood together, and they had only one goal: destroy Caesar. The final battle came at a place called Alesia. Vercingetorix hid behind high walls on a hill, but Caesar was not afraid. He built a giant wall around the city. Then, he built a second wall around his own men. He trapped the Gauls in and kept their reinforcements out. For weeks, the two armies stared each other down. Starvation, rain, rotting bodies. Then, chaos. The Gauls attacked from inside the city. Another army attacked from outside. Caesar was trapped. Two enemies, one chance. He climbed his horse. He led the charge himself. Swords clashed. Arrows flew. Men screamed. Blood soaked the earth. But Caesar didn't break. He won. Vercingetorix dropped his weapons. He rode his horse to Caesar, and he bowed. Rome cheered. They said Caesar was the greatest general who ever lived. But not everyone was happy, especially not Pompey, especially not the Senate. They saw something in Caesar's eyes now. A hunger, not just for land, but for Rome itself. 49 BC, the Rubicon River. It was just a small river, a narrow, slow stream that barely made a sound. But crossing it would change everything. Caesar stood on the bank, staring into the water. He had just finished his conquest of Gaul. His fame spread across the world. His soldiers loved him. His enemies feared him. And yet, there was still one thing he needed to do. Take Rome. The Senate, led by Pompey, feared Caesar's power. They didn't want him to rule. They didn't trust him. Caesar was given an order. He had to leave his army, go back to Rome alone. But he had a choice. A terrible, dangerous choice. If Caesar obeyed the Senate, he would lose everything. His soldiers, his power, his glory. He would become just another politician in a city of corrupt men. But if he didn't obey, if he took his army across the Rubicon, it would mean civil war. It would mean treason. And it would mean death. Caesar took a deep breath. His soldiers stood behind him, waiting. His eyes burned with fire. And then, he said the words that would shake Rome to its core. The die is cast. And with that, he led his army across the Rubicon. The moment they crossed, there was no going back. Caesar marched into Italy, crushing Pompey's forces one by one. His soldiers followed him, loyal and fierce. Every town they passed through opened its gates to Caesar. Rome was his for the taking. The Senate fled. Pompey ran to Greece, but Caesar wasn't satisfied. He wanted it all. He chased Pompey to Greece. He defeated him at the Battle of Pharsalus. Pompey fled again, but this time, he was hunted. He sailed to Egypt hoping for help. The Egyptian king, Ptolemy XIII, had different plans. Pompey was murdered on the shore. Caesar arrived to find his old friend's head on a platter. Caesar wept. But his war was far from over. Now Caesar ruled Rome. He had all the power. He had no more enemies, or did he? March 15th, 44 BC Rome. The city was buzzing. Markets were crowded. Chariots raced through the streets. People laughed and argued. The air was thick with the scent of bread and wine. But that day, something was wrong. Caesar woke early. He had dreams of more conquests, more battles to win, more lands to claim. He had become dictator for life. No one dared challenge him. His power stretched across the known world. He had the people's love and the Senate's fear. But whispers filled the halls of Rome. Not everyone saw Caesar as a hero. To some, he was a king in disguise, an enemy to the Republic. There were many who believed he was a tyrant, and they were planning something terrible. The conspirators waited in silence. A group of senators, once loyal to Caesar, now turned against him. They called themselves the Liberators. In their minds, Caesar's rule had gone too far. He was taking all the power. He was becoming the king the Romans had feared for so long. But who would stop him? It had to be done. The Ides of March would be their day. As Caesar walked to the Senate, the conspirators gathered. Their hands shook. Their minds raced. They had no choice. The Republic must be saved, even if it meant spilling Caesar's blood. Caesar walked into the Senate house, unaware. His bodyguards stayed behind. He trusted these men, these senators. Some were his closest friends, but they weren't friends anymore. The moment Caesar sat down, they struck. The first blow came from Casca, a fellow senator. He lunged at Caesar with a dagger, grazing his neck. Caesar gasped, but did not fall. He stood tall, fought back. But the conspirators were too many. They surrounded him. One by one, they stabbed him. Brutus, Cassius. Each blow landed, and Caesar fell to his knees. Then, the final blow. Caesar looked into the eyes of Brutus, his trusted friend. Et tu, Brute. And you, Brutus. Caesar died on the Senate floor, the man who had ruled the world, the man who crossed rivers, the man who conquered nations. He was gone, and Rome would never be the same. The conspirators fled, but they were not safe. The city of Rome would soon be in chaos. Caesar's death did not bring peace. It only set the stage for a new war, a war that would tear Rome apart. The people mourned Caesar. His supporters were furious. In the end, it was not the liberators who won. It was Caesar's adopted son, Octavian. He would rise from Caesar's shadow, and Rome would fall to him. But that was a story for another time. Caesar's death marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. 43 BC Rome. Rome was in flames. It wasn't the literal kind, but the city burned with anger, with confusion, with grief. Caesar was dead. The Republic was crumbling. The streets were filled with whispers. Who would rise to take Caesar's place? Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, was only 18 years old, a young, untested leader in a broken world. But he had something others didn't: ambition and strategy. Octavian wasn't alone. He formed an uneasy alliance with Mark Antony, one of Caesar's closest generals. Together, they vowed to avenge Caesar's death. They fought against the conspirators who killed Caesar. One by one, they crushed them. The Battle of Philippi was where the final blow was struck. The liberators, led by Brutus and Cassius, were defeated. Brutus, once a close friend to Caesar, was killed in battle. Cassius took his own life. But Octavian and Antony were not friends for long. After the battle, their alliance began to fray. Antony was loyal to Caesar's memory, but Octavian had different plans. He wanted to rule Rome alone. In 31 BC, the final confrontation came, the Battle of Actium. Antony and his lover, Cleopatra, led a massive fleet. Octavian's forces were smaller, but they were better trained, and they were led by a man who wanted nothing more than complete control. The battle raged across the sea. Sails billowed in the wind. The clash of swords echoed in the distance. But in the end, it wasn't just the battle that determined the victor. Antony's fleet was destroyed, and Cleopatra, in a desperate attempt to escape, fled back to Egypt. Antony followed her, and soon the two took their own lives. Mark Antony, the great general, was dead. Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, was gone. The world belonged to Octavian now. He returned to Rome as the undisputed ruler. In 27 BC, he took the name Augustus, meaning the revered one. Rome was now an empire, and Augustus was its first emperor. But Augustus knew the Republic couldn't be restored. There was no going back. The old ways were gone forever. Instead, he turned Rome into a machine of order, a machine of control. He reformed the government. He created new laws. He restructured the army. He built roads. He made sure the people of Rome worshipped him. And he didn't stop there. Augustus created the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For over 200 years, Rome would prosper, largely untouched by war. But the cost of peace was heavy. The Republic had died with Caesar, and Rome had become something new, a dictatorship in all but name. Augustus ruled for 40 years. He died in 14 AD, leaving behind an empire that spanned continents. He left behind a legacy that would echo for centuries. The assassination of Julius Caesar had been a turning point, but it was Augustus who truly changed the course of history. Caesar's death ended one chapter of Rome's story, but it was Augustus who began a new one, an empire of power, control, and blood. 14 AD Rome. The streets of Rome were silent now. The city had lost its greatest ruler. Augustus, the first emperor, was dead, but the empire he built would not die. It had all started with one man, Julius Caesar. Caesar's rise to power was unstoppable. He conquered lands, he crushed enemies, he was loved by the people, feared by the Senate, but his ambition, it went too far. Caesar's death had shattered Rome. The Republic had fallen, and from the ashes, Augustus had risen. The empire that Augustus left behind was unstoppable. It was the greatest empire the world had ever known. Its army was unmatched, its wealth was endless, its cities stretched from the deserts of Egypt to the northernmost reaches of Britain. But what about Caesar? What was his legacy? In his lifetime, Caesar had created something few rulers ever achieve. He had turned power into legend. His name became synonymous with greatness. The word Caesar would live on for centuries. It would become the title of emperors. It would be used by kings, pharaohs, and dictators. Caesar had built an empire, yes, but more than that, he had built an idea. The people of Rome still spoke of him in whispers. Some called him a god, others a tyrant. But all agreed on one thing: Caesar's impact was immortal. His death, though tragic and violent, had changed the world. Rome would never return to the old republic, but under Augustus, it would flourish into the Roman Empire, a dynasty that would endure for centuries. Julius Caesar's ambition had cost him his life, but it had given birth to the greatest empire the world had ever known. And in the end, Caesar was more than just a ruler. He was the force that changed the course of history. Even today, we remember the story of Caesar, a story of power, betrayal, ambition, and death. His life, his rise, and his fall are woven into the very fabric of Rome. And so the question remains: did Caesar die for nothing, or did his vision live on through the empire he created? Have you heard this story before? What do you think truly happened to Caesar, and how did his legacy shape the world? Subscribe now to Unbelievable True Story, because every week we uncover real stories that change history. Watch the next video on your screen, or dive into our full playlist of real mysteries and crimes. The next story might be even more shocking.